Welcome back to Nick Lenz's Comic Corner Classic, Less Known Classics. This is episode number 2318 and double number 2212. Now, I do have Amazing Spider-Man Masterworks, that's something. But the one kind of this will be part of one trade and entirety of another trade for X-Men. First that we have is Marvel Masterworks, The Amazing Spider-Man, Volume 21. Which collects issues of the Amazing Spider-Man series 213, the 223, and the 15th annual. The 15th annual, in case you're curious about that is a guest appearance by the Punisher, where you have various different news articles happen in the book, while also with all people Dr. Octopus. Yep. Yeah. Now, your writer for these issues is mostly Danny O'Neil, who does issues 213 and 219, 221 and 223. He also does the annual. Michael Fleischer does issue 220. I know Mike Deborah also 220 as well. Bill Mantles does 222. Jay Matias does 223. Mark Greenwald and Roger both co-write the annual with Danny O'Neil, annual 15. John Meehan Jr. is the main artist of the issues, does 213, 218, and 223. Frank Miller is the art for the annual. Luke McDonald does 219. 220 is done by Bob McLean and excuse me. Win Mimor. Alan Kupperberg does 221. 222 is Bob Hall. Margaret also has the artwork as well for the annual, with Mary Silver, Kelly Pollard, and Greg Rook. The main book itself covers the period of February of 1981 to December of 1981. So we got partway through the 1980s here. Now, in the case 213, it's basically Spider-Man versus the Wizard. Yep. And also there's this woman, of course, this issue and the following issue. And it also involves Namor the Submariner in this issue. Yep. He comes around this issue. Yes, the Submariner. Yeah, he pops up right next issue. It's a story thing, of course, this always looks like she might be into Spider-Man, but no, she's basically just an enemy of. And of course, it involves the Fight Four as well. We have the Wizard, Sandman, trapped in this mysterious guy, who I think is supposed to be Electro. Actually, it's not Electro, it's actually this woman named Lara. Yes, an enemy of Namor. And this story continues in 215, which I think it concludes with this issue. Yep. And then pretty much basically, 216, we have return of Madam Web. First time since her debut, I think back in 208. This is her second appearance. Yep. Mostly put just Peter going down his luck. Because there's no real, like, aside from guest appearances by Madam Web, there's nothing really else noteworthy about this issue. Not really. 217 features the second appearance of the Hydro Man. And features a return of Sandman, despite we just seen a couple issues ago wearing a completely different costume. That's never explained. 217 to 18 is a two-parter where it involves Sandman, Hydro Man, where they're fighting each other over the love of one woman. Yeah, this woman named Sadie, who was introduced back in Hydro Man's debut. She returns here for this two-parter. And at one point, Sam and Hydro Man merge together to become Muckman. Yes, seriously. Denny O'Neil could have a good idea of a character who was, I believe, one was a creation of Stan Lee and Steve Ditko. And I think it's the character he created. Excuse me. Now, as for how in the world that Hydro Man managed to survive his encounter with Spider-Man in his previous appearance, I have no idea. Yeah. Let's call him Mud Thing. He was last here back in 212. Samuel, of course, was last seen back in 215. Mud Thing, which was only around for a very brief period of time. Yeah, they appeared for these 2 issues. And then they made a return in Marvel 201 number 86, or if you're in a flashback. By the very next issue, basically, they're unmerged. Yeah. Yeah, and apparently over the course of these 2 issues, apparently Peter Parker 656 and Martin 17 take place the same period of time as this book. Yeah. 219 is the return of the Grey Gargoyle and Jonas Hathrow, with someone named Armin Dubroth, who only appears in this 1 issue. Yeah. 220 features the return of Moon Knight, and we have first appearance of Group of those National Security Directorate. Yep. Yeah, the group of gangsters only appear just this solo issue. We also group known as the Rat Pack, which they also appear in this very issue. Yeah, it's basically oh yeah, let's throw Moon Knight just because. And then 221, basically by a guy called Ramrod, who last appeared in the issue of Daredevil of all things. Yep. Where his associates in that previous issue died. Yeah, they freaking died, but he survived. But after this 1 issue, his next appearance is not until, get this, Fantastic Four 335 in December 19th. This was in January. He was returning for 8 years. Yes, 8 years. 222 was noteworthy for being when the criminal wizard becomes Speed Demon. And he's still known as this currently to this very day. Yeah, that's something apparently Marvel likes doing. Yeah, where you have a character from who's not associated with him make a guest appearance in this book. In the case of Black Widow, it's the first appearance of her costume. She still wears this very day. We also get appearance by Iceman, Nightcrawler. But yeah, first appearance of Speed Demon. Now, Speed Demon itself last appeared back in Avengers Annual number 8 in October 19th. This was first appearance in 3 years. His next appearance actually is not long after this, a year later. And finally, to cap it off with 223, we have Spider-Man versus the Red Ghost and his Super Apes. That's interesting. Yeah, so Red Ghost's next appearance is in Contest of Champions the following year. Yeah, this book overall was really good. I give this Marvel Masterworks I'm gonna give it a 10 out of 10. It was really fun. Next up is basically where my interesting thing comes in. We're gonna talk about Marvel Masterworks Uncanny X-Men Volume 14. We're not gonna discuss the whole thing, mind you. We're discussing issues 515 to 519 in the Fantastic Four vs. X-Men miniseries. Fantastic Four vs. X-Men miniseries, written by Chris Claremont, is mostly put like a story where Reed Richards becomes evil, becomes Doctor Doom, and hurts his family. Of course, the X-Men have Chip in to basically save him for what he's doing. That is mostly put what the miniseries is meant for. Now, in the case of Uncanny X-Men, we basically we're talking about 215 to 219. And you're thinking, why are we discussing these issues? Well, there's a reason why. Because basically, here's the thing. I have already discussed issues to 199 to pretty much basically about 210. If you're curious about those issues, I discussed from 199 to 209 when I talk about the trade X-Men Ghost. 210 to 214, that's Mutant Massacre. Yes, so mostly put in the case of this issue, we're introduced to Crimson Commando, Stonewall, and Silver. So Crimson Commando, yeah, basically in a way, this book in particular, it's the first appearance of 3 guys who would later be associated with Freedom Force. This is basically their debut. 216, we see the death of someone Priscilla Morrison. Yeah, who actually appeared last issue. Yeah, so we see her get killed off. You're mostly with the Morlock in these few issues. You can deal with the aftermath issues, We also have Dazzler, I guess, we appear in this issue. We have Dazzler here in these issues. Or she fights the Juggernaut in 217. And 218, mostly pro, we have Black Tom Cassidy return. Yep. And then 219 is basically when Havoc rejoins the roster. Storm rejoined the roster, part of this one. And basically we have, well, Polaris join the Marauders under the influence of Polaris. Yep, that's mostly put exactly what that book is. Surprisingly, the annual was the 11th hit was not in this book at all. Nope, not really. Now, really fun trade. Loved it. I'm gonna give this trade here I think it's gonna be like a 9.5 at least 9.5 out of 10. But the big book I want to talk about here is X-Men Inferno Prelude, which collects from the main book from Uncanny X-Men from 228 to 238, along with X Factor. Yes, X Factor. I think it's like 25 to something. Let me take a look here. The Prelude, the main book itself, contained X Factor 27 to 32 and the third annual, Uncanny X-Men 220 238. Now, there's also new issue in here as well. I'm not going to discuss this or the annual. The X Factor issues mostly put for them is mostly dealing with the aftermath of the events of Fall of Mutants. That's mostly what this book is because you can think of this as bridging the gap between Fall of Mutants and Inferno. Basically, in a way, it's basically like especially with stuff we see in Inferno. Like in the X-Men issues, one thing noteworthy happening there is that we see debut Madeline Pryor's Inferno attire that she occasionally still wears nowadays. How it comes about is really weird. Like she's given this like cloth to wear, and she wraps it on herself, and then like part of it gets ripped off, and that's how basically she gets her outfit. No, seriously, let's get her outfit. The X Factor annual is a really cool annual, where on the cover you have Apocalypse fighting High Evolutionary, which is so awesome. Yes. But in the case of the X in particular, mostly put it's them basically set in their surroundings in Australia. That is mostly put exactly what's going on here. We're not dealing with Inferno just yet, per se. It's mostly the aftermath Fall Mutants, and basically we're bridging the gap here. And if you're curious about A number 12 for Uncanny X-Men, see, A number 3 was tied into an event known as the Evolutionary War. So was the X-Men Annual. Mostly put, basically, we have death of one character, Gorok, who actually did die but came back. But in the case of Uncanny X-Men 228 to 238, if you're curious what happens, of course, these issues, we have basically them, well, they haven't moved yet to Australia, but that's most what happened to them after Fall Mutants. They basically moved to Australia. And we also debut in 220 of the Ravers. Yes, the group of cyborg mercenaries who still appear this very day. The first two members are Brownbaker, Pretty Boy, and Skull Crusher. We also have members of Jessica Hone. If you're curious who this woman is, this is Tiger, the ruler of Manjapur. And someone named Gateway. You think Gateway? Yeah, it's a character who, basically another character would basically, use his powers later. 230. It is mostly put basically, well, dealing with a guest appearance by Mutants and, of course, Magneto. It's mostly put we just deal with some demons of the X-Men battling. And then we have the Brood. Yes, the Brood. Yep, we're dealing with the Brood mutants. The Brood themselves, I believe this was their first appearance. I think so, if I'm not mistaken. No, let me be part of that. Yeah, this is basically a brood set of issues from 232. I think about 234. I think it is that the X-Men fight in the brood. Mm-hmm. That's continued in the annual. Yep. And then like 235, they fight someone. They fight a group known as the Press Gang, who despite this being the first appearance, they appear the following issue 259, 264, issue X Factor, and 2 issues of Fantastic Four Volume 3. And that's it. Just Mutant Force. That's most of what it is. We also first read someone named Jennifer Ransom, who has appeared sporadically since this book it came out. Yeah, she was a regular character in this book from 235 to 238. Popped up now and again. And the most recent appearance was in X-Men Volume number 11, which was the start of the Eve of Destruction crossover. Yep. Yeah, I think it was at this point in time that's when the X-Men decided to move out to Australia. Yeah, because they needed to get away from New York, so to go to Australia. And they were there for quite a while. Mm-hmm. We also had Rogue deal with stuff related to Carol Danvers. Yep. And then pretty much basically 238. After 238, basically 239 is go straight to Inferno. Yep. And I've already discussed Inferno. And the X Factor issues mostly put them get used to ship. We deal with the fall with the Four Horsemen. That's mostly exactly what those issues are. It just deals with the fallout. That's most of those issues are. It's a very small amount of issues compared to Uncanny X-Men, which has 11. Yes, it's 11 issues. Yes.
Can you drive Grandma home so I don't have to load Hudson up?
Okay.
Looks good, by the way.
Thank you.
It actually almost smells a little fresher too.
Yeah.
It's helpful, huh?
Yes.
How long have it been since you vacuumed?
I don't know.
Yeah. Is that Uncle Nick? There he is. So come and get your tubby time ready? Want tubby time?
Well, I'm going to give X-Men Inferno Prelude a 9.5 out of 10. Really good book. And with this, we're kind of almost out of the 1980s. I have to basically verify that later, but I think I'm almost out of the 80s. I think so. Because I think like next thing to discuss is, let's see. I think with that in particular, I have now reviewed for Uncanny X-Men. Excuse me. I think it's now from basically issue 1 up until I think it's like 260 something. I think it is. I think so because basically it is okay. It's up to 267 now. Yep, I have now reviewed the first 267 issues. Now, am I out of 1980s? You might be asking, am I out? Well, let's find out. The answer is yes. Basically, with reviewing this book in particular, and the other book, Uncanny X-Men is officially out of the 80s, making it the third series from Marvel Comics that's out of the 80s. Which means all that's left is just the 90s and the early 2000s. And by the way, in the case 200s, there's not many issues left to review for that one. So basically, after a few more books, I'll be adding 200s for this one. Basically, also like in the case of Amazing Spider-Man, I'll get past issue 300. Yep. But yeah, that's particular view. I have to go take care of something. I'm going to come back here to watch more HQ. Okay, next video. Bye.